Welcome to the Narrowgate Podcast. I'm Weston.
And I'm Logan.
And this is the Wendell Taylor episode.
Wendell.
Wendell is a staff member here at Narrowgate Lodge. He takes care of our property. He takes care of our student. He is absolutely essential to the student programming here at the Lodge. And I thought it was a great conversation with him.
Yeah, man, I've enjoyed getting to know him through this because, again, we kind of like missed each other as far as, you know, when I was in Tennessee and kind of when he kind of joined the Narrowgate family. We got to hear today a lot about what that looked like for him and kind of what insight he's gleaned from that and how he's getting to serve and love on guys today. So
Yeah, I get to work with Wendell every day, so it was really cool to hear his story and really for you and everybody that's listening to kind of get to know Wendell because he's kind of quiet and not a whole lot of people know his story. So I think that it's really cool that he was on our podcast.
Yeah. And as always, if you want to hear more about Narrowgate, you can check out our show notes. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
Well, Wendell, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Yeah,
Good to see you, man.
we ask two questions every podcast, and those questions you'll be familiar with. But those questions are, who are you and why are you here? And you can answer them however you want to. So, who are you and why are you here?
Well, I think the answer I have answers both of them, and that's I'm a person that has passion to give back to young men what was given to me, which is showing me what a real relationship with God was.
What brought you to Narrowgate in the first place?
Well, in 2018, I was running a concrete business, and I just had a really rough summer, and I was ready for a break and needed to get away from everything, and so I knew about Narrowgate, and I'd been down here and poured some concrete jobs for Narrowgate, knew about it, and I thought, well, they got some cool tree houses down there. There's no cell phone service down there. I can go down there and get away. Nobody can get a hold of me and bug me or bother me. So I called Boots, and I come down here and was going to stay in a tree house for a week. And I think I ended up staying 3 months. And so, you know, and the more I hung out and the more I got to just sitting back from a distance watching what was going on, it was like, this is different from anything I've ever seen, you know. And I grew up in church and knew about church and went to church my whole life, but I was hearing things and seeing things that I'd never seen in church. And so I just got more interested. And the more I watched and sat back and watched, the cooler I thought it was. And so one day Bill just said, hey, do you want a job, you know? And I said, yes, and didn't even think about it. And at that time, I just shut down a concrete business and come to work at Narrowgate. And I knew God was calling me to it, and I could feel it during the time I was here, that 3 months. And I still, at that time, couldn't believe that what I was hearing, that I could be used to help somebody else. But so that's how I got to Narrowgate.
What again, you mentioned kind of, you know, having that church background, and kind of two-part question, like what was that church background? And I don't know, what are memories of that kind of time for you? And then secondly, what were those things that you saw at Narrowgate? Because again, it kind of feels like you're just outside looking in for a while.
Yeah.
What were those things that you saw that were just so different that they just pulled you in to want to experience what these guys were experiencing?
I think a relationship with God. I think I went to church my whole life, checking a box. I think it was go to church, get saved so you don't go to hell, and go to church because that's what good people do. And I think I lived my whole life like that, not knowing that myself can be in a relationship with God, you know.
Why do you think that you mentioned, you know, what you saw at Narragate and how much, like the longer you stayed, the cooler it got, and you knew that you were being called out of the place that you were at, the concrete business, so that you could be used to affect change in the lives of these young men. Why do you think that's important to you?
Identity and purpose. My whole life, I based my identity in whatever I did, whether it was a professional bass fisherman for years, whether it was, hunting, or whether it was a business owner or whatever it was. That was who I was. And when I got here, I got to hearing, no, your identity is based in Christ. That's who you are. It's who he says you are, not what you do. And I think at that time I thought, well, I've been looking for that my whole life, searching in other things and people and places and doing different things. And I thought at that time, well, that's who I am. But it always ended with an emptiness, And I think I was just tired of searching. And for one thing,
Tell me about a time that you feel like that you got to invest in a guy's life or use your story and your background, that thing that, like, I can hear the passion in your voice, as you're talking about it. Can you think of any like specific time where you can remember like having an impact on the life of a student, like a particular student?
The biggest one that sticks out to me is we had some students one time, and you probably know the story I'm going to tell, and they was weed eating and we was mowing, and I was watching them, and they was just really being lazy, didn't want to do it. Their attitudes was really bad. And one of the guys, I was making him push more because I caught him laying down under a tree, and they was just ribbing the weed eaters up. So I'd hear them running.
Yeah.
But they was hiding,
Okay.
So I called him and I gave him a push mower, and I said, I want you to push mower this area. So I left and I snuck around and I went back up and I went up in the barn, and I was watching out the window of the barn and watching these guys. And he was aggravated, and he took the lawnmower and he just shoved it off the hill. Well, it went all the way off the hill and went upside down in the creek, And of course, my first response is, I'm gonna kill him, And so I come out of the barn, and it's times like that first on, it was hard for me, because that's the way I wanted to react. Is he needs a butt whooping, or And but what I learned was these guys was learning character and learning how to be a man, and learning stuff like that. And I can look back at that same guy now, which actually works at Traco, still working for Narragate, and just he's succeeding and doing well and leading other people. And I look at times like that to where guys come in and they're just broke and lost and, don't know how to, do things. And you look at that and you look at them even at graduation or a year later, and, maybe 2 or 3 years later when they have a kid and get married, and, and it just gives you a reward,
Yeah.
So
I do remember that, like, very clearly.
Yeah.
I remember it was.
I think I had to come and get you and
did.
say, you got to go with me or I'm going to kill this guy.
Yeah, well, because you were new. You were pretty new at that point.
It was like I was my first few months here.
Yeah. And I remember you said, hey, would you mind just coming with me? And I'm about to chew this boy out. We just make sure that I chew him out the right way, Because you're like, that's a memory that I have too. And you did great, and there was no like condemnation or like, aggressive correction. It was just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What part of that did you think was appropriate, pushing a lawnmower down the hill?
Yeah.
And he knew it, he owned it, but I think that was memorable, and he will remember that as well.
Yeah. And he has. And I even remember he come back like a year later to a reunion, and he seen me and he come running off the hill, hey, Wendell, how you doing? Just, and it's that, when you can look back and see you've influenced a life.
Yeah.
Man,
I'm curious. I wonder if it's an interesting part of your role here. Like, how do you find that you motivate somebody to do something that they don't want to do and do it in a way like with the love of God that's going to eventually transform them, that's going to eventually benefit them? Like, how do you respond to somebody who just doesn't want to come along?
Yeah. Well, sometimes they don't respond, but I think you got to take each one different. You can't, it's not a cookie cutter, like this is how I do it. Mm-hmm. I think you got to look at each young man's life, and you got to, first of all, he's got to get to know you and trust you, mm-hmm. And then once that happens, it goes a lot easier. And I think leading by example is another way, when they see it and start to respect that in you, mm-hmm. it makes them want that.
Cool.
So,
yeah, some of the ways that you interact with the students are just, like amazing. The thing that comes to mind recently is, I think it was last week or the week before, it's getting to be car washing season, after the winter time, kind of dies down. We don't do a whole lot of car washing, but Wendell told a group of the guys and, some intern or somebody on staff to go up and wash the vehicles. Well, they get up there and they're done in 20 minutes, mm-hmm. And Wendell knows obviously automatically if a guy just washed a vehicle in 15, 20 minutes, they didn't do it good, So he took a truck up there and got all new cleaning supplies, got, wax and detailer and, like trim restore and all the stuff. And he went up there and spent 4 hours with him on one vehicle, detailing every little square inch of it. And they were asking questions like, what is this stuff? And it's like the wax, that you put on, like how to wax and how to buff it. And so he went up there with him for 4 hours and detailed his truck, Yeah. Got to start, lead by example.
Out of it, right?
Yeah, but like these guys nobody had ever, like they actually thought they were done after 20 minutes, and it's like they're using dirty water to wash the truck and it dries on there. And it's like, does this look clean to you? And they're like, yeah, we washed it,
Yeah.
But Wendell actually going up there and spending the time going through each step, like they learned something,
Yeah, and that's the thing with some of the guys. I'm not saying all of the guys, and I think all of the guys experience something here that they haven't been shown at home or through somebody, whether it's building a building or, washing a car or weed eating grass, or it could even be how to cook in the kitchen and how to wash dishes or how to, clean a house or how to fix a toilet or, it's just things they haven't been taught. And, it's when you teach these guys that and then step back and let them do it, their confidence grows, and they feel better about themselves.
Yeah. I don't know why that reminds me for some reason. I think my first week on staff, this is way back when I was still a knucklehead then, but I think it might've been Colin and Boots. He was either Colin or Boots or Colin and Boots who said, hey man, we need you to go check all the tire fluid in all the cars. Yeah.
And you did it.
Oh, talk about a guy who didn't know how to do anything. I was out there for like 45 minutes going, how do I check tire fluid?
Yeah. It's that one and then the
blinker fluid.
Blinker fluid.
Oh, it might have been blinker fluid.
Yeah. Go check the blinker fluid.
I don't know how to do that, guys. No, I don't know. There is something really cool about like, it's a part of living in community. Cause like if we're all living here, if we're all living life here, like this place deserves to be taken care of.
Right.
And treated with respect and upkept. And like, I don't know. I think it's so amazing that, a student experience at Narrowgate, you learn a lot more than you think you will.
Right.
And of course you're like, man, you're studying the Word of God every day, but like y'all are doing the real work of like being fathers to these guys, being brothers to these guys, and like teaching them just life skills and maintenance skills that, goodness, I know I was missing out on a lot of those when I showed up.
Right. And I tell guys that a lot. I said, one of these days you're going to have a wife and you're going to have kids and you're going to have a house. And anytime something breaks, are you going to call somebody to do it? or are you going to do it yourself? And it's the same way with whether it's a vehicle or a lawnmower and doing maintenance on it. How do you take care of your stuff?
Yeah.
You know, because if you don't learn, well, then it's either going to tear up and you got to buy new, or you're going to have to call somebody else to do it for you. And, you know, that's, for me, that's not how I want to live as a man, is have to call another man my whole life to fix something I should know how to fix. You know, that just does something to your character too.
Sure.
You know, and so I try to teach them all I can, you know, and I'm getting pretty old and I've done a lot in my life, so I feel like I have a lot to give and a lot of knowledge in that area. And so I think that's my gifts here, you know, is that.
Well, I mean, like, where'd you get your work ethic? Where'd that come from? Where'd you get all these skills that you've developed over the years? You know, what?
Well, I think it was probably the generation I was raised in, you know, and, you know, I had a childhood where I was either one or two things. I was either made to work, you know, parts of my childhood, or I didn't have no choice but to work, you know, because we was poor, didn't have nothing. And if I wanted something, I had to learn how to work to make money. And I was working from 6, 7 years old, you know, on a farm, you know, in tobacco fields, to, you know, cutting firewood during the winter and selling it. And, you know, it's just the way I grew up. And so I think that's part of why God can use me here like he does, is because a lot of things in my life that I've went through and had happened to me, or I've experienced in my life, some good and some bad, I can relate to so many things in these guys' lives.
I got a good idea. We could start a YouTube channel with Wendell teaching everybody how to fix stuff around the house.
That's it.
What do we call it?
I've actually thought of that several times.
Wendell's World.
I was going to say, do you have any like catchphrases around here with the students or something? I mean, like, eventually that happens.
The Wendell way.
The Wendell way. The Wendell way of work.
Yeah, I have a lot of sayings that I do.
Oh, yeah? Well, give me a couple.
Well, one of the things I do, I call the guys dimes a lot of times if they're running behind. And they say, "What do you mean I'm a dime?" I said, "You're a dime holding up $1. You know, here I'm trying to make $1 and I'm waiting on a dime."
Yeah.
You know.
He says that a lot.
So I got a lot of,
He says that a lot.
I got a lot of sayings,
Yeah.
and they're always like, "How do you come up with all these things?" I said, "Because that's what I was told when I was your age."
That's great.
Yeah.
My favorite is sometimes I'll say, "How you doing, Wendell?" And he'll say, "I'm finer than a frog hair split 3 ways."
That's pretty fine.
That's good.
That's really
That's
fine.
a good one.
He's also changed the way that we say afternoon around here. He says the evening, and that's from like 12 to dark, you know, is the evening.
Oh, yeah.
Which most people would say afternoon.
I can get behind that.
Yeah, and what's funny is we actually all say evening now. Like,
Oh, everybody?
yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird, but it happened.
Yeah, and you don't have breakfast, dinner, and lunch. You know, you have breakfast, dinner, and supper.
And supper.
Yeah.
Where are you from, Wendell?
So I'm from about 2 miles from here.
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
2 hours from here.
Yeah.
I've lived in Tennessee my whole life.
Gotcha.
But yeah, and it's biblical. Like, you can't argue my point. You know, did the Lord have the Lord's dinner or the Lord's supper?
Hey.
So you can't
Okay.
argue with me
No, I
on
can
when
get-
supper
I
time
can get
is.
behind that.
You know,
My mom's family is from Alabama, and I mean, goodness, they sure talk pretty similar. And because again, they say supper, and I grew up with my mom saying britches. Sorry, I don't know why what am I on?
what do you call it?
Pants.
Oh.
No, I do say britches because people call me out on it sometimes.
That's good.
It's good. Feels
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
It's like a more natural and
He said-
I don't know.
he
Boy,
So I
says-
get along with your mom good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, she's a great lady.
She's a great
nice
conversation.
lady.
Yeah.
I always said that we were going to get a pamphlet of all the Wendellisms. So that
Yeah.
way, whenever somebody heard him say something they didn't know what it was, they could flip through their pamphlet and find a translation.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I'd like a copy of that. Yeah, it's cool.
Wendell, you mentioned earlier in your own words that you're getting older, right? So I just want to refer back to that before I, say,
Yeah.
you're the oldest person on staff here at Narrowgate. And I don't mean that as an insult. It's a, it's a compliment, right? There's something biblical about being older and having gray hair and all that.
Right.
All that to say, probably shouldn't have said that much just to emphasize how old you are.
Do you want to start over?
It's all good.
Sorry.
I'm bringing it up for a point. You've leaned into the culture of Narrowgate, not being a Narrowgate graduate. You were somebody from the outside who joined our staff and very quickly became enculturated to the Narrowgate culture. And what has that been like for you in your experience here? And how would you say that it seems to have come so naturally to you to just plug in and be an extension of who Narrowgate is?
I think it's because I seen something I wanted. And it was something that I believed was real, and it was like attractive to me. I'd been in the concrete business for 15, 17 years, I don't know, and I lived in a dog-eat-dog world, and it's go, 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 and it's all about making money, and it's all about, it wasn't nothing about relationships. It wasn't nothing about really loving people. It was, it's about get it done and get it done as quick as you can and move on to the next, And when I started, even before I come to Narrowgate, I'd met somebody that was pouring into my life and was showing me a different way, of doing things and, being at peace with things instead of, like, my whole life I was fighting to be somebody or do something or to have things or to be the top guy at this or the top guy at that. And like I said, a lot of times I succeeded at that. But when I got on top, it was like, where's the purpose? I mean, it's still not fulfilling. It's just you got to look for the next thing to succeed in or get better in or be on top in. And it's like I'd repeated that several times in my life, and when I got to finding real happiness don't come from a job or money or what you are or a title or, what you do. Real happiness comes from God, and I got to looking for that. I seen it here,
What would you say is something that you would be like a barrier, if one even exists, between like you impacting the students in the way that you are so passionate about doing?
I think the barrier would probably be the way I lived my whole life. It wasn't about a relationship. And now doing what I do, a relationship has to be part of that. And I've even learned that over the 5 years I've been here. The longer I'm here, the more I realize, even, was the last year I've even changed, to become more aware about that. It ain't about just telling somebody to do something and getting a result. It's about loving them through things. And, so I think I'm still learning,
Yeah, sometimes the task or the things that you need to get accomplished, the objectives, they kind of in your mind take precedent over the reason why you're doing the tasks and the objectives, which is to build a relationship with the students. And so sometimes I think that's a mentality that can be applied anywhere. Sometimes we're so task oriented that we're just trying to check the boxes and get our to-do lists done that we forget that there's people involved in our lives that they need to come first.
Yeah, most definitely. That's been the biggest learning curve I've had to do since being here, and I'm still learning. I'm not perfect every day at what I do, but I do have a passion for these guys growing, and becoming better men, and godly men. So
I know you talked about, just that discovering like the joy and the purpose in a relationship with God. I was wondering if you could just kind of point to some practical things in your life that are just different, you know, in your relationship with God now than they were before discovering that?
Yeah. I don't think until maybe a year or two before I come to Narragate, I didn't know what having a relationship with God was.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I grew up in church, you know, from time I was old enough to remember going, you know, got baptized when I was 10, you know, and I got rebaptized later when I actually knew what I was doing. This just not because the whole Sunday school class did it, but, you know, I was in school my whole life, but I always thought it was, we go to church so you don't go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought, you know, or you go to church because that's what good people do.
Sure.
You know, and you got to go to church to check that box. But and I think sometimes that's what's sad about the Christian life a lot of people live today is they're missing out on so much more. You know, to have a relationship, you got to spend time with them. You can't do that 2 hours on Sunday morning or 1 hour on Sunday morning, you know. And I had grandparents that was, you know, and they probably had relationships, but they never, I guess if they tried to teach me that, I didn't hear it or didn't want to hear it, or I missed it somewhere. You know, I don't know the answer to that, but I really didn't know what a real, true relationship with God and getting your happiness and your joy from Him. I always thought you had to get it from everything else, you know.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. Whenever you're interacting with students, or, I mean, since that's primarily who you're working with, I'll just keep it at students. But what's the message that you want to get across to them? Like underneath all of the, you know, practical ways that you know, interact with the students, what's the main thing that you want to instill in them, the main part of their character that you want to develop, you know, as with an end result of them being the man who you would hope they would become?
Well, I think 2 or 3 things. I think a work ethic is most definitely like, I want them to learn a good work ethic. And number 2, money or a job doesn't give you happiness. You know, even if you have a good work ethic and you work your hind end off and you succeed, that don't necessarily mean you're going to be happy. Because it was a lot of days I had everything on earth I could ask for, and come home on Friday and wanted to blow my brains out, you know. And it was just that I was looking for it in the wrong places. You know, I thought, well, if I can make this much money, I'll be happy. If I can live in this house, I'll be happy. If I can drive these cars, I'll be happy. You know, and all that stuff. It was temporarily, you know, it might work for a day or 2 or a week or 2 or even months or 2 at times. I was always stepping back saying, well, what I got to have next, you know? And so I think them learning that, not to say that I don't want them to try to be successful and stuff like that, but don't put your identity in that. And that's what I did. You know, that's where my identity is on what I did, what I had, and what I was doing. You know, that was my identity. And if you put your identity in that, you're never going to be happy. It don't matter where you're at or what you have or what you're doing. You know,
that's such a needed voice, man, throughout the student experience, especially at the end of a student experience. I mean, that was kind of a chunk of my story as I was on my way out of Narragate. And again, I had a calling on my life for vocational ministry. You know, I made some mistakes. I made some boneheaded decisions. And, you know, ministry school I had just freshly started in at the time. Like when they kicked me out, I was like, well, that's it. The thing that I was going to do is now dead. And so even though my identity was like, oh, it's like vocational ministry, it's a call from God, I was still focusing on the thing that I was going to do instead of like who God could call me to be. And so, yeah, man, just seeing that possible opportunity the possible job, whatever it is I was going to do after that. Like, man, I responded in shame and like ran the other way. And like, that was another season of my life that God needed to work on me through. But I think that's such a great reminder to have for students, for you to develop that trust with them through their student experience. Yeah. And then be able to tell them, man, it's not about the money. It's not about the job.
Yeah. I think a lot of times that's a learned lesson. That's a discovered truth, not a delivered truth. That's the saying. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's the case, I think. But, when you can tell them that and plant that seed, they can always look back like, well, I've done this and I've done this. And, I had that girlfriend, or I had that wife, or I had, whatever it is, their identity is in. When it lets them down, it's like, well, where am I going to go now to get fulfilled? And it took me 50 years to learn that through bunches of things I tried to do in life, and I'd get there and it was like, well, what now? I just get the next thing, or well, I'll quit this and go do this. And you do it and you get good at it and you succeed at it. And then you're sitting there and you're like, well, is this all life's about? You mentioned one of those things was pro bass fishing. Yeah. What was that? What was that experience like? I mean, you don't have to go into a lot of detail unless you want to, but I'm curious because I haven't heard about that before. I mean, that's news to me. Yeah, it was young. I was young when I was doing it, and I love fishing. Grew up in between Kentucky Lake and Barkley Lake, and grew up on the water fishing, and that's everything I wanted to do. And I started fishing when I was like 18, 19 years old. And by the time I was 23, I was fishing a pro circuit and, had a boat gave to me, and we had sponsors. And, wow. And that is a long story, but a lot of my life, my dad wasn't involved in my life. And he was a truck driver and going on the road, most of my life, and I didn't see him. And I had a son at the time that was 2 years old, and I was leaving to go to a tournament, and I can remember pulling out of the driveway, and I was looking back, and he was standing on the porch crying. And I always swore that I would never do my son that way. And I realized, I got down there and was fishing, and I realized I'm doing the same thing to him. I ain't never at home. I'm going traveling, fishing, or on the water fishing every day. I don't never see him. And I just said, I ain't going to do it. And so I just quit, But it was another thing. That was my identity. Yeah. And it was, and it's just, I did that throughout life with different things that, that's, at that time, I'm a pro bass fisherman, or, I'm a business owner, or whatever it is, and all that stuff. Like I said, it just, when you got there and got it, you was either looking for something else or you wasn't happy with it, I got another question too. I'm curious. What's your favorite thing about working with this guy? Well, Weston, I think me and him, our personalities is a lot alike. Yeah. And me and him is, we shoot each other straight, and but I just get along with Weston. Yeah. He's a good dude, and he has passion for this place. He has passion for these guys, and I don't never have to worry about Weston not doing what's right for the guys. And I trust him in that. And so with that, me and him get along good, and I don't think we've ever had a really a disagreement or so we get along great. It's good.
Yeah, that's true, and very meaningful. Appreciate that. Yeah, feels good. Yeah, it's really, Wendell's the guy that I know that if there's some kind of like sensitive thing that I need to bring up, I'll go to Wendell, be like, hey, what do you think about this? Mm-hmm. And I mean,
9.5 times out of 10, I feel like you've already been thinking about it. You're already, got 3 examples of why we need to have this conversation, and so it's always good to, have somebody in your corner.
Yeah. And plus, I'm doing sort of the job that Weston did when he was here. They just changed the title.
Yeah,
a little bit.
And increased the the things to manage on property.
Yeah, I'm a student life manager, but in that I'm still the property manager. But a lot of times he was the community manager or coordinator while property managing. So I feel like me and him's done the same thing. So he knows what my job is like, and I don't know what his job is like, and I don't want to know. So I'm happy with that. So, we get along good.
I like whenever we get to like team up and put our heads together on a problem, like it could be a new problem, maybe the water system or, like some kind of thing that's happening and neither one of us really know what's going on, but we get to like team up and go like, 2 property managers at one problem. It's kind of a cool thing.
So Wendell, man, we're so glad we got to talk today. If you wanted to wrap up by just giving one word of encouragement, man, maybe it's a graduate you haven't seen in a while. Maybe it's guys who are, graduating soon and going to be listening to these just as a way to stay connected or be encouraged. What would you leave them with today, man?
No matter where you're at, whether you're a graduate or somebody that's in a situation that maybe I was in before I got here or figured it out, the devil wants to keep you down, and he's going to throw all these things at you to shame you or tell you can't do something or you're not good enough or, whatever it is. He uses all kind of, just don't believe it. God can do amazing things through people like me that I didn't think he could use me in the way he's using me, and I heard them things, well, like you could never do this, and it's just don't listen to the lies, and you're never so lost that you can't be found.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
Yeah, man.
That's a really good one.
Well, we're thankful you're part of the family, dude.
Yeah. Super thankful for you.
Yeah. Good deal. I'm glad to be here.
Yep. If you ever leave, I'm coming with you.
And I won't be stepping in as property manager. You don't have to include that, Colin. You can cut that last one out.